You've heard the story before. Once upon a time, humans decided to stop chasing deer across the plains and settle down. We planted seeds, built villages, and began the grand experiment called farming. Sounds wholesome, doesn't it? Like a PBS special where everyone smiles in slow motion while sowing wheat. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Farming wasn't a leap forward into comfort. It was a leap into mud, monotony, parasites, and the kind of hard labor that would make a modern construction worker cry into his Gatorade. And tonight, lucky you, you've woken up in one of the very first farming villages. Forget about crisp cotton sheets, the buzz of your phone, or even a pillow. You're lying on a mat of reeds thrown over a dirt floor, not dirt-colored tiles. Actual dirt, the kind that sticks to your skin and grinds into your fingernails. Your mat smells faintly of mold because it is moldy, and every time you shift you hear the subtle rustle of something small and six-legged escaping. Was it a beetle, a flea, a louse? Congratulations, you're now a bed and breakfast for bugs. The walls around you are lumps of clay mixed with straw, smeared together by hand and left to dry in the sun. They look solid at first glance, but they crack whenever it rains, which is often. Your roof is a thatched dome of reeds and grasses, tied together with stringy fibers. It keeps some of the weather out, but not much. When it storms, water drips through onto your face. When it's windy, smoke from the hearth swirls back into the room, making everyone's eyes water. You're coughing before you even stand up. You share this hut with your partner, your children, maybe a grandparent or two, and definitely some livestock. Chickens peck at the corners. A goat has been bleating since before dawn, gnawing on the woven mat you were supposed to sleep on. Privacy doesn't exist here. You can't close a door or draw a curtain. You can't roll over without bumping into someone's elbow. And if you need a moment alone, your best option is to step outside and pray no one follows you. This is open concept living in its rawest form. Airbnb by way of misery. The air is thick and sour. Smoke from last night's fire mixes with the stench of damp bodies, animal droppings, and rotting reeds. Everyone's coughing, wheezing, scratching. You notice lice crawling in your child's hair, and you realize with dread that they're in your hair too. This isn't a rare outbreak. This is normal. Every head, every blanket, every corner of the hut is a battlefield for bugs. Outside, the rooster crows. It's not charming. It's a shrill reminder that your day of labor is about to begin whether you like it or not. You shuffle barefoot toward the doorway, stepping carefully to avoid your cousin's toddler, who is already crying, and the goat, who is glaring at you like you stole its best patch of straw. You step into mud. Not metaphorical mud, actual mud, laced with goat droppings, pig droppings, and human droppings too, because toilets don't exist yet. Someone dug a pit yesterday, but pits fill quickly. The smell of decomposition, smoke, and manure punches you in the face. Flies rise in black clouds. Rats scatter, bold and fat from eating stored grain. Their sharp eyes gleam in the morning sun. These rats aren't afraid of you. You're just another competitor for the food pile. And here's the cruel irony. You thought giving up hunting and gathering would mean stability. You thought no more chasing deer through forests, no more gambling on whether the berry bush will be in season. But farming is no vacation. You've traded variety for repetition and freedom for confinement. Every day is the same. Fields, weeds, grain, and endless back pain. You can't walk away from your crops. You can't pack up and move on. Farming ties you down like a ball and chain, only sweatier and itchier. Back inside the hut, your eyes land on the grinding stone. This heavy slab of basalt will rule your life. It's called a quern, and paired with a smaller handstone, it's how you turn wheat into flour. Sounds rustic, right? Here's the truth. Grinding grain is backbreaking, wrist-killing work that takes hours every single day. You crouch down, knees bent, back arched, and push stone against stone until kernels shatter. Your muscles burn, your hands blister, and your joints ache. Archaeologists can tell which skeletons belong to early farmers because their teeth are worn down to stumps from chewing gritty flour, laced with tiny rock particles. That's right, every bite is sandpaper for your molars. Congratulations, you've just invented dentistry by accident. The smoke from the hearth stings your eyes. Your stomach is already growling, but breakfast is just more grain pounded into mush. It's the same thing you ate yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. Imagine oatmeal, but worse. No sugar, no honey, no cinnamon, just boiled paste with the occasional bug floating on top. Variety, gone. Hunting and gathering gave you berries, nuts, fish, honey. Farming gives you porridge, forever. The hut is buzzing with noise now. Babies wailing, children bickering, adults barking orders, animals crying to be fed. There's no peaceful moment, no quiet reflection, just the constant hum of survival. You scratch at your skin, noticing the angry welts of flea bites along your ankles. Everyone has them. They're part of village life. You can't wash them away because bathing is rare, and water is filthy. You can't avoid them because they live in the straw mats, the mud walls, the animal's fur. You just scratch and scratch until you bleed, and then you scratch some more. And this is just the start of your day. You've barely stretched your sore back, barely wiped the dirt from your eyes, and already you're tired. The field is waiting. The weeds are waiting. The animals are waiting. Farming never stops. It's not a choice anymore. It's a sentence. Here's the cruel joke. The hunter-gatherers outside the village are still roaming the forests. They're taller, healthier, and better fed than you. They look at your mud hut and your grain mush, and wonder why you'd ever do this to yourself. But you can't go back. Once a village settles, it grows. More huts, more fields, more mouths to feed. You're trapped in a cycle that feels endless. Sow, weed, harvest, repeat. And if the crops fail, you starve together, packed shoulder to shoulder in your smoke-filled clay oven. You thought farming would be an upgrade. Instead, it's a trap. And this is only the first hour of your day. So you've survived the night on your bug-infested reed mat, and managed to stumble outside, without stepping face first into the goat pen. Congratulations. You've leveled up to the next stage of Neolithic survival food, or at least what passes for food here. Spoiler alert, there's no bacon, no fried eggs, and no hot coffee. What's on the menu is less hearty breakfast, and more culinary hostage situation. Your first task isn't even eating. It's grinding, and no, not the fun kind. The morning begins with the daily ritual of suffering over the quern stone. A massive slab of basalt sits on the floor, paired with a smaller handstone. You kneel in front of it, back bent, and begin dragging the smaller rock back and forth, crushing handfuls of wheat into flour. It sounds simple until you've been at it for half an hour, and your wrists are already screaming for mercy. Another half hour, and your knees ache like you've aged 50 years. Another hour, and your shoulders feel like someone's taken a club to them. And you're not even halfway done. This isn't optional. It's not like you can shrug and say, maybe I'll just have cereal today. This is the cereal. Grinding grain is the price of survival. And if you don't put in the hours now, you don't eat later. Welcome to the first great lesson of the farming life. Your food owns you, not the other way around. By the time you've scraped together enough flour, you're covered in sweat and dust. Fine grains of powder coat your arms, your face, even your eyelashes. You look like a sad ghost who's been haunting a bakery. Your hands are blistered. Your back feels like it's trying to fold in half. And now, after all that work, what reward awaits you? A glorious feast? No, a lump of porridge. Someone dumps the flour into a pot of water that's been simmering on the hearth since yesterday. They stir with a stick. That's it. No butter, no sugar, no cinnamon, just flour and water, occasionally thickened with beans if you're lucky, or flavored with a single onion if the gods are smiling. You stare at the bubbling mush and wonder if this is breakfast or punishment. Spoiler, it's both. You're not just eating for today either. You're eating leftovers that have been reheated and topped up for weeks. Archaeologists call it pottage. I call it the medieval soup starter kit, but worse. Imagine oatmeal that never ends. You pour new ingredients in as the days pass, a root here, some beans there, maybe a frog if it fell into the pot. The flavor is a mystery, a very depressing mystery. The texture is just as grim, thick, lumpy, sometimes slimy, a grayish-brown mass that clings to your wooden spoon like it's trying to escape back into the pot. And here's the fun part, it's gritty. Every scoop carries tiny particles of stone shaved off the quern during grinding. You chew carefully, and still your teeth protest, with each bite. Over time, this sandpaper diet will grind your molars down to stubs, leaving you with a mouth that feels more like gravel than enamel. Dental floss hasn't been invented yet, but even if it had, it would cry and run away from this mess. You shovel the porridge into your mouth because you're starving, not because you want to. Hunger is the only seasoning in this village, and even that isn't strong enough to mask the taste. You notice a bug floating on the surface, maybe a beetle, maybe a fly. You fish it out with your spoon and flick it away. Or maybe you don't. Protein's protein, after all. On the side, there's bread. Don't get excited. This isn't the soft, fluffy loaf you buy at a bakery. This is bread made from coarse barley or rye, often bulked up with whatever filler was lying around. Ground up acorns, wild seeds, maybe a handful of dirt if someone was careless. It's dense, heavy, and so hard it could double as a weapon. You don't slice this bread, you negotiate with it. Every bite feels like chewing on a roofing tile. By the end, your jaw aches like you've gone 3 rounds with a prize fighter. And the worst part, this is all you're getting. Forget about variety. Hunting and gathering gave your ancestors fruit, nuts, fish, game, a seasonal buffet. Farming villages give you grain porridge for breakfast, grain bread for lunch, and more grain for dinner. Day after day, week after week, until your body starts to protest. Malnutrition becomes your shadow, your bones weaken, your immune system falters, you're eating constantly, but somehow you're still starving. And what do you drink with this sad excuse for breakfast? Not water. Water will kill you. Streams are full of parasites and bacteria, and wells often double as trash pits. So your safest option is weak beer. Yes, beer, for breakfast. Even the kids drink it. It's low in alcohol but at least boiled during brewing, so it won't immediately kill you with dysentery. You sip it half-heartedly, knowing this is the closest you'll get to joy today. Breakfast doesn't bring energy. It brings obligation. You eat because you have to, not because you enjoy it. Every bite reminds you of the grinding, the aching, the endless cycle of labor. You swallow the last mouthful, scrape the sticky porridge off your spoon, and look around the hut. Everyone else is chewing in silence. No one smiles. Children scowl as they gulp their mush. Adults look resigned. Even the goat seems unimpressed. And then, when you think maybe you can rest for a moment, the real work begins. Fields don't weed themselves. Animals don't feed themselves. The porridge was only step 1 in a 12-hour marathon of suffering. You sigh, wipe the grit from your teeth, and prepare to step back into the mud. So you've choked down your porridge. You've survived the bread that doubles as a weapon. You've even managed a swig of warm, flat beer that tastes vaguely like moldy hay. Congratulations. Now comes the part where farming reveals its true cruelty. Forget breakfast being the worst part of your day. That was just the tutorial. The real game is about to start, and it's rigged against you. Step outside, and the village greets you with a view that's equal parts impressive and depressing, fields of wheat stretching out like an endless chore list. When your ancestors were hunter-gatherers, their office was the entire landscape, forests, rivers, meadows. They went where the food was, took what they needed and moved on. But you, You're tethered. These rows of wheat are your prison bars. You don't roam anymore. You farm, and the farm farms you right back. The soil under your feet isn't soft, rich, and dark like the gardening commercials. It's heavy, stubborn clay that clumps together when wet and cracks like old pottery when dry. Your job is to break it with the simplest of tools. A wooden hoe, maybe tipped with stone if you're lucky. It's not sharp, it's not efficient, it's basically a glorified stick. You grip it anyway and start hacking at the earth. Within minutes, sweat runs down your face, mud cakes your legs, and your back screams in protest. This isn't gardening, this is combat, and the enemy always wins. Weeds fight back harder than any deer your ancestors ever chased. They sprout overnight, tough, thorny and smug, their roots gripping the soil like claws. You rip at them with bare hands until your fingers bleed, and for every handful you pull, 3 more pop up the next day. You will never win. Farming is a war of attrition, and the weeds have the home field advantage. Then, there are the pests. Not the children who whine at your ankles, though they qualify. I'm talking about the bugs. Locusts descend in thick swarms, chewing through crops like a living storm. Beetles, aphids, caterpillars, all of them small, relentless saboteurs. And you have no pesticides, no clever traps, just frantic hands waving and prayers muttered at the sky. The crops don't care. The bugs don't care. The gods don't care. Your sweat and blisters mean nothing if the insects win. But let's pretend for a moment that the weeds are pulled and the bugs are merciful. You still have weather, the great invisible tyrant. Rain doesn't fall when you want it. Sometimes it doesn't fall at all. The sun bakes your fields into clay pans. Other times, it rains too much, turning your fields into a swamp where seeds drown. There's no irrigation system, no forecast, no climate app on your phone. You just look at the sky and hope. And when the sky laughs, you cry. And speaking of crying, so are your children, because they're not at school learning math or history. There is no school. Their curriculum is fetch water, weed crops don't die. By the age of 5, they're already carrying tiny baskets, stooping alongside you in the fields. Childhood doesn't exist. There are no toys, no playdates, no cartoons, just miniature laborers working until their spines curve like yours. Your partner isn't faring better. While you hack at weeds, they're tending the animals. And that's no gentle petting zoo. The pigs are rooting through the mud, the goats are trying to escape, and the chickens are plotting violence in their tiny beady eyes. Every creature stinks. Every creature needs food, and every creature has figured out that survival means stealing from you whenever your back is turned. You're not raising animals, you're managing a rebellion. By midday, your body feels like a half-broken plow. You've been hoeing, bending, hauling, cursing. Your hands are swollen. Your legs ache, and your stomach is already rumbling again, because that porridge burned through your system like a false promise. You take a break under the shade of a tree, if there is one, swatting at flies and gnats that never, ever leave you alone. You scratch at bites, scratch at lice, scratch at your own sanity. The insects always win. But here's the cruelest part. Even after all this back-breaking effort, there's no guarantee you'll have food later. Crops fail all the time. Too much rain, they rot. Too little rain, they wither. A sudden frost, gone overnight. A swarm of locusts. Years of work erased in a day. You can work yourself raw and still go hungry. Farming isn't security, it's gambling. But instead of losing coins, you lose calories, health, and occasionally your children. Meanwhile, your hunter-gatherer cousins out in the forests are still taller, healthier, and better fed than you. They eat berries, fish, honey, venison. They laugh around campfires. You eat grain paste and cry into your muddy hands. The irony is almost funny, except you're too tired to laugh. And yet, the fields aren't optional. You can't quit. If you walk away, your village starves. Farming villages are traps that grow bigger every season. More huts, more mouths, more land to till. The cycle spirals endlessly, and you're chained to it until you die. You don't own the land. The land owns you, and right now, it's making you sweat through your one filthy tunic while you swing a hoe at weeds that don't care if you live or die. So, enjoy your day. You've only got another 8 hours of this ahead, and then, if you're lucky, you get to do it all again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Welcome to the great agricultural revolution, humanity's proudest mistake. So you've done your morning fieldwork. Your back is bent, your arms are sore, your hands are blistered, and you're already dreaming of a nap you'll never get. But the village isn't done punishing you. Because here's the truth. Farming villages weren't just places of food and community, they were also petri dishes of pestilence, crammed with people, animals and germs in close quarters. You didn't just trade nomadic freedom for grain, you also traded relative health for the constant joy of coughs, rashes, and the occasional plague. Let's start with the basics. Your house is a biohazard. Mud brick walls, thatched roof, dirt floor, charming in theory, disgusting in practice. Every time it rains, the roof leaks. Every time it doesn't rain, the floor cracks. The hut is always damp, always smoky from the cooking fire, and always alive with insects. Flies buzz around the waste bucket in the corner. Fleas leap off the straw bedding. Lice crawl freely through your tunic seams. And mosquitoes hum at your ears all night, leaving you with welts that itch until they bleed. You're not sharing your house with family. You're hosting a tiny zoo of parasites. And then there are the real animals. Your goats and pigs don't live outside in a neat little barn. They live in the same one-room hut with you. Why? Because if you leave them outside, someone might steal them, or wolves might eat them, and then congratulations, you've lost your only wealth. So they come inside. At night you curl up in your corner, while a pig snores a foot away and a goat occasionally relieves itself on the floor. Chickens perch on rafters, sometimes dropping little gifts on your bedding. The smell? Imagine a mixture of sweat, manure, smoke and mold, trapped in a sealed clay box. You breathe it all night, every night. Forget scented candles. The only fragrance you get here is odor barnyard rot. Now let's talk about your bathroom. Spoiler, there isn't one. If you're lucky, your village has a shared pit out back. If not, you use a bucket or the edge of the field. Waste piles up quickly, and no one's hauling it away in a cart. Instead, it seeps into the soil, runs into the stream, and ends up in your drinking water. Human waste, animal waste, and garbage mingle into a smelly river of doom that runs through your daily life. And when it rains, it floods into your home. Mud mixed with excrement. That's your flooring now. Hope you like squelching around in humanity's leftovers. This isn't just gross. It's deadly. Diseases thrive here. Dysentery, cholera, parasites, all waiting in that lovely stew. Your stomach cramps, you vomit, and you spend the night squatting miserably, dehydrating into oblivion. And since no one understands germs yet, your neighbors think it's bad air or angry gods. The cure? Maybe a ritual, maybe a chant, maybe just hoping you survive. Medicine hasn't entered the chat. Speaking of germs, say hello to rats and mice, your new best friends. They love farming villages because you've conveniently piled up grain in clay storage jars. To you, it's survival. To them, it's an all-you-can-eat buffet. They squeeze through gaps in walls, gnaw holes in sacks, and scuttle across your floor at night. They spread fleas, chew your food, and leave droppings everywhere. You're constantly trying to scare them off, but they're winning. In fact, they've been winning for thousands of years. The rats you're cursing today are the same ancestors that will one day deliver the Black Death. Consider this their practice run. And the bugs? Oh, they adore you. Fleas hop between you and your animals freely, carrying parasites that burrow under your skin. Lice infest your scalp until you scratch yourself raw. Mosquitoes spread fevers, Ticks cling to your ankles, sucking blood until they swell. Everyone itches constantly. You can't escape it. Bathing isn't common because remember, people think water opens the pores to disease. So, you live in your own filth, scratching sores, bleeding into your tunic, and pretending this is normal. And since everyone else looks just as miserable, it is normal. Now, let's zoom out. What happens when you cram dozens of families together in a cluster of huts, surround them with waste, and fill them with fleas, rats, and chickens? Epidemics. Your farming village is basically a laboratory for disease evolution. Pathogens that couldn't thrive in small mobile bands of hunter-gatherers now find a perfect playground. Packed humans, constant contact, dirty water, and stored food. Suddenly, illnesses jump from animals to humans with terrifying ease. Zoonotic diseases, you know, the ones that cross over from animals, find their first playground here. Influenza, smallpox, measles, the seeds of humanity's worst plagues are planted in villages just like yours. Let's imagine you cut your hand on that stone hoe from earlier. It's a small cut, nothing serious. In a hunter-gatherer world, you might wash it in a stream, slap some herbs on it, and be fine. Here though, that cut becomes a death sentence. Dirt gets in, animal droppings get in, infection sets in, your hand swells, the wound oozes, and within days, fever racks your body. There's no antibiotic, no antiseptic, no clean bandage. Maybe the local wise woman smears honey or ash on it. Maybe she chants, maybe she burns sage. But the bacteria laugh, spread into your bloodstream, and soon you're shaking on your straw mat waiting for death, all because of a scratch. Children suffer the most. Infants drink contaminated water, crawl through filth, and play with chickens carrying parasites. Half of them die before age 5. Parents don't even name babies right away, because odds are they won't survive long enough to learn it. Imagine watching every other child in your hut cough themselves into the grave, and everyone just shrugs. That's life here. Brutal, short, and full of tiny funerals. No one has time to mourn. And yet somehow you keep going. Because what's the alternative? Go back to the forests, where food is less certain but life is cleaner. You can't. The village has too many mouths, too many fields, too many obligations. You're trapped in this muddy, disease-ridden settlement, praying that the gods or ancestors keep you alive through another outbreak. By evening, your head is pounding from smoke and dehydration. Your skin crawls with bites. You try to lie down on your straw mat, but it's alive with fleas. Your neighbor coughs all night. Your child scratches their scalp raw. The pig squeals in the corner, and you realize the real predators aren't wolves or raiders. They're the invisible armies of germs, parasites, and infections that farming villages have unleashed upon humanity. You thought farming was going to make life easier. Instead, it invented sickness. Congratulations, you're not just a farmer. You're a test subject in humanity's first pandemic factory. And spoiler, you probably won't survive the experiment. You've survived the morning's pest-ridden hut, the day's back-breaking fieldwork, and maybe even the cough of your neighbor who's been hacking up death since sunrise. So what do you get as a reward? A banquet? A feast? Some tender roast meat? And a flagon of wine? No. You get to stare into the joyless abyss of Neolithic cuisine. Let's start with storage. In a hunter-gatherer world, food was fleeting. You ate it fresh, roasted it over a fire, and moved on. But farmers don't move on. They settle. And settling means stockpiling. Clay jars of grain, stacked in huts, pits of barley sealed with mud, baskets of millet hanging from smoky rafters. It sounds clever until you realize that every other creature on Earth has discovered the buffet. Rats, mice, beetles, mold. Your food is never just yours. It's a community project shared with vermin. And even when the grain stays yours, it isn't exactly appetizing. Imagine scooping from a pot of wheat that's been sitting in damp clay for months. The kernels are sprouting mold, A few wriggling larvae wave hello, and the smell is halfway between sour beer and dirty socks. But you still grind it, still cook it, still choke it down, because it's either that or starve. Grain isn't dinner, it's punishment disguised as survival. So, what's on tonight's menu? Pottage, again. That eternal swamp of boiled grain, beans if you're lucky, maybe a wild onion or two, if someone found them by the river. Every day the same slop, sometimes thick, sometimes watery, always grey. It doesn't taste bad so much as it tastes like nothing. A bland, heavy nothing that fills your stomach while robbing you of the will to live. Bread, yes, sort of. Forget golden loaves with crusty tops. Your bread is a hard, flat disc of barley or rye, more weapon than food. It's so gritty from stone ground flour that you're literally chewing pebbles. After a few years of this, your teeth look like a mason's workshop, cracked, worn, stained. Every bite is dental erosion in progress. Congratulations, you're slowly grinding your own smile into dust. Meat? Don't make me laugh. Farming villages didn't usher in daily roasts, they actually made meat rarer. Hunting dwindled because you're too busy tending crops, and domesticated animals are too precious to slaughter. A pig is wealth, a goat is milk. Killing them for dinner is like burning your paycheck. So unless it's a festival, a funeral, or a desperate famine cull, you're not chewing flesh, you're gnawing on plants. And when you do finally get meat, it's not fresh, juicy steak. It's salted, smoked, or dried into leathery strips that could patch a sandal. Salt is scarce and valuable, so preserving food is half-baked at best, sometimes literally, which means you spend the winter chewing moldy jerky while pretending it's delicious. Spoiler, it's not. Now let's talk famine. Because famine isn't an accident in farming villages. It's a feature. You're tied to the seasons now, to harvests that can fail with one bad storm, one swarm of locusts, one drought. A bad year isn't just hunger, it's devastation. You run out of grain halfway through winter, and watch as your children's bellies swell from malnutrition. You ration meals so tightly that bread crusts feel like a feast. You boil weeds, bark, even leather if you're desperate. And when famine truly hits, villages empty. People die quietly in the corners of huts, wrapped in smoke and silence. And yet, oddly enough, food doesn't just kill you by absence, it kills you by presence. Grain-heavy diets bring new diseases, rickets from lack of vitamin D, scurvy from lack of vitamin C, anemia from lack of iron. Your bones weaken, your gums bleed, your skin pales. In the hunter-gatherer days, people ate a variety. Berries, fish, nuts, meat, roots, balanced, colorful, even fun. Farming funnels all that down into a single endless stream of beige gruel. Variety dies, and with it, your health. Let's not forget contamination. Stored grain attracts fungus. One particularly nasty one, ergot, grows on rye. Eat it, and your limbs convulse. Your vision swims, and your skin burns with a sensation locals will later call St. Anthony's fire. Congratulations, your dinner just poisoned you with hallucinogenic fungus, and you still have to choke it down, because there's nothing else. And then there are the parasites. Not the rats this time, but the invisible freeloaders in your food. Worm eggs cling to vegetables grown in waste-tainted soil. You eat them, they hatch, and suddenly your gut is home to squirming guests. Malnutrition worsens. Your stomach swells. You're not just feeding yourself. You're feeding an ecosystem inside you. At the communal level, food becomes politics. Who owns the grain? Who gets to eat first? Storage pits are locked, guarded, and fought over. One bad harvest, and neighbors become enemies. Steal grain, and you might lose a hand. Hoard too much, and you might find yourself accused of sorcery. Nothing builds community spirit quite like accusing each other of curses while everyone starves. Dinner isn't comfort here. It's another battle. Another reminder that farming didn't solve hunger. It institutionalized it. You're always at the mercy of the harvest, of the weather, of the rats, of your neighbor with sticky fingers. You never eat to fullness. You eat to survive another day. And the cruelest part, this is permanent. You don't just endure one bad harvest, you endure a lifetime of them. So you sit by the hearth, chewing gritty bread, staring into the watery pottage, listening to your stomach growl, even as you swallow. Children whimper for more. Elders mutter about gods and sacrifices. And you realize this isn't a meal, it's a negotiation with starvation. Farming villages didn't invent security, they invented permanent hunger. You thought farming villages meant stability, a roof, a granary, a hearth, a pot of pottage. Maybe not luxury, but at least equality. Right, wrong. Farming doesn't just grow wheat, it grows hierarchy. And you, my friend, are not on the winning end of this harvest. Let's rewind. In hunter-gatherer bands, life was far from perfect, but at least power was diffuse. Everyone moved together, shared food, made decisions as a group. If someone tried to hoard too much, the others rolled their eyes, laughed at them, or simply walked away. No hoarders, no landlords, no tax collectors. But once villagers appear, everything changes. Land is suddenly everything, and land can be claimed, fenced, guarded. Suddenly, some families have better fields, more animals, more jars of grain, and once they have more, they keep it. Power stops being fluid, it calcifies. So where does that leave you? At the bottom. Welcome to the glorious invention of social inequality. Some households are now big men, hoarding grain, demanding respect, lending seed at interest, and deciding who gets to eat when famine comes. Others, the vast majority, are scratching out survival, praying their clay pot isn't empty before the winter ends. And you're in the latter group, working yourself to death so someone else can get fat. Let's talk about food first, because food is currency here. That pit of grain in your neighbor's hut, it's not just food, it's power. They lend you a sack in lean years, and you spend the next 3 seasons paying them back, with interest. It's the Neolithic version of a mortgage, except instead of foreclosure you risk enslavement or starvation. You're chained, not with iron but with obligation. And obligation doesn't stop at food. Someone has to dig irrigation ditches, build fences, patch huts, maintain pathways. Do you think the grain-hoarding elites pick up shovels? Of course not. That's your job. You labor in the fields not just for your family, but for theirs. Sometimes in rotations, sometimes as tribute, sometimes just because if you don't, your children don't eat. Farming doesn't free you. It enslaves you to your neighbors. Now let's add religion into the mix. Because no hierarchy is complete without divine justification. The elites don't just hoard grain, they claim the gods want them to. They build little shrines, hire shamans, and suddenly your backbreaking fieldwork isn't just survival. It's sacred duty. Refuse to help. Clearly you've angered the ancestors. Better sacrifice a goat, or your sickly child, or at least a week's labor to make it right. Spiritual blackmail has entered the village. And somehow, it always benefits the families with the most jars of barley. This is how inequality hardens. The more harvests pass, the more wealth accumulates. The elites start wearing ornaments, shell necklaces, bone pendants, polished stone axes, while you're still tying your tunic with twine. They sit taller in meetings. Their huts are larger, drier, less rat-infested, and they begin to pass this wealth down to their children. For the first time in human history, inheritance chains power. Some kids are born to play, others to plow. Your child might spend their entire life bent over fields, while the elite's child learns how to count jars and chant prayers. And don't think violence is off the table. Once you have inequality, you need force to protect it. The big families organize militias, armed with better weapons, polished flint blades, heavy clubs, even the first copper trinkets. You've got a stick. Step out of line, and that stick won't save you. Hierarchy means punishment, and punishment means pain. And then there's the taxes. No, they don't call them taxes yet. But every harvest the elites demand tribute, a portion of your grain, a piglet, a share of your labor. Sometimes it's couched as an offering to the gods. sometimes as protection against raiders, sometimes just as the natural order of things. Whatever the excuse, the result is the same. You do the work, they reap the benefits. Farming isn't community, it's feudalism in beta testing. Here's the kicker: you can't escape. In the old days, if life in one band got too tense, you could pack your spear and move on. But here, you're stuck. Your fields are here, your hut is here, your dead are buried here. And if you try to leave, where do you go? Other villages are just as oppressive. The wild is gone, parceled up by clans. So you stay, bending your back so someone else's belly stays full. Let's talk survival odds. You're already weakened by malnutrition, riddled with parasites, exhausted from labor. Add to that the stress of constant inequality. You live under someone else's rules, someone else's gods, someone else's power. One wrong word, one missed tribute, one bad harvest, and you're ruined. And this isn't temporary, this is forever. Your children inherit your debts, your status, your suffering. Hierarchy is hereditary now. Welcome to the birth of class. And the irony: farming was supposed to be progress, supposed to be abundance. But here you are, poorer in freedom, poorer in health, poorer in spirit. Your life isn't your own. It belongs to the land, the gods, and the handful of neighbors who figured out how to stack jars higher than everyone else. So as you hunch over your field, sweat stinging your eyes, stomach gnawing with hunger, ask yourself, did farming make life better, or did it just invent bosses? Spoiler, it's the latter. Farming villages didn't just invent bread, they invented inequality. And for you, that means a lifetime of obedience, hunger, and exhaustion, all so someone else can sit on a stool and call it destiny. You thought the worst part of farming was the aching back, the endless pottage, the rats, or maybe the elites squeezing you dry. But farming villages have one more delightful invention for you: organized violence. Because once humans start piling up grain, pottery, animals, and land, someone else inevitably shows up and says, "Nice stash. Shame if anything happened to it." Welcome to the dawn of raids, warfare, and neighborly slaughter. Let's start with your own village. Even without outsiders, violence simmers under the surface. Remember that grain debt you couldn't pay back. The elite family isn't just going to shrug and say, "No worries, old friend." They send their sons with clubs to take your goat or your child. Debt bondage, that cheerful tradition, begins right here. Fail to meet your obligations, and you or your kids become servants. Violence, not kindness, enforces the system. But neighbors are worse. Farming means staying put. No more melting into the forest when conflict arises. Your huts, your fields, your burial mounds are permanent targets. One morning you're weeding millet. The next you're running barefoot while another village storms through with torches, smashing jars and grabbing pigs. Hunters might squabble over deer carcasses. Farmers fight over entire harvests. Violence scales up, and you're defenseless. The elite's guards, they're protecting the big jars, not your hovel. You're left with a wooden hoe, facing raiders wielding sharpened flint axes. Spoiler: hoes aren't great weapons. Your best hope is to hide in the smoke-filled hut and pray they don't notice you breathing. But they always notice. They're here for food, tools, maybe even people. Raids often end with women and children dragged away as spoils. Farming didn't just invent surplus, it invented slavery. The bodies pile up. Archaeology tells the story. Mass graves of villagers with skulls smashed, skeletons with stone arrowheads embedded in ribs, burned out huts sealed by ash. You can still picture it. Whole settlements wiped out in a night, their belongings looted, their bones scattered in ditches. Farming made us sedentary. Sedentary made us vulnerable. And even when it's not raids, it's feuds. Fields blur into each other. Whose strip of barley is whose? Who controls the best well? Where does your irrigation ditch end and mine begin? Every line is a potential conflict. A pig wanders into a neighbor's plot, and suddenly two families are swinging clubs. Neighbors gather, blood spills. No police, no courts, just raw retaliation. Feuds can last generations, whole villages locked into cycles of vengeance because someone's goat ate someone else's onions 30 years ago. Now let's step it up. War. Not modern war with battalions and strategy. War with confusion, fire, and panic. Dozens of villages band together to raid others, to seize land, to destroy rivals. The technology of death scales. Right alongside farming. Stone axes are polished sharper. Arrows become more common. Spears are hardened in fire, and walls appear. That's right, fortifications. Your idyllic village now bristles with ditches, palisades, wooden fences, because you live in fear, not safety. Every harvest, every jar, every sheep is a target, and here's the sickest twist. Violence becomes normal. Kids grow up with it. They play with toy bows, practice throwing stones, mimic raids. The culture of the farming village isn't just about growing wheat, it's about guarding it. Peace is no longer the default, war is the backdrop of life. For you, this means constant anxiety. When you kneel in the dirt sowing seeds, you glance over your shoulder, waiting for shouts. When you hear dogs bark at night, your heart leaps. Is it wolves, or worse, humans? You don't sleep deeply. You don't trust easily. The walls of your hut don't protect you. They trap you. Farming villages aren't heavens. They're siege zones waiting to happen. And then there's ritual violence, because if the neighbors aren't killing you, your own people might. Some villages decide to make sacrifices to appease gods of harvest and storm. Guess who they use as offerings? Prisoners of raids, yes, but also unlucky locals. Skeletons show cracked skulls, deliberately smashed, buried under huts. Sacrifice is insurance. You live with the knowledge that the gods might demand blood, and the elites will never offer their own. So what does this mean for survival? It means that death by violence becomes just as likely as death by hunger or plague. You're not just fighting pests and famine. You're fighting other humans. Every harvest is a gamble. Will you live to see it stored, or will someone else light your hut on fire and steal your children before the moon wanes? Farming didn't just grow food. It grew warlords. It created haves and have-nots, hoarders and raiders. You're the have-not. The plundered, the terrified, and no matter how hard you work, how fast you run, how quietly you pray, the truth is the same. You can't farm in peace, because peace doesn't exist. Farming villages are built on conflict, so the next time you imagine a quaint little Neolithic village, smoke curling from huts, kids laughing by a hearth, remember this: behind those smiles is fear. Fear of raiders, fear of debt collectors, fear of gods, fear of each other. Violence isn't the exception, it's the rule. And you're living proof that farming didn't invent civilization. It invented civilized killing. So far, you've endured famine, parasites, inequality, and the constant threat of raids. But there's one enemy more dangerous than hunger or violence. One that creeps into every hut, every body, every breath: disease. Because farming didn't just give us bread, it gave us germs. And you're about to become the petri dish of history. The village of filth. Let's begin with the obvious hygiene, or rather the lack of it. Your hut is a one-room wonder shared with family, animals, fleas, and whatever died in the corner last week. Smoke clogs the air, turning your lungs into slow-burning hearths. The dirt floor doubles as a latrine in emergencies. Chickens scatter droppings where you sleep. And outside, the street is a slurry of human waste, pig dung, and rainwater pooling into something the color of despair. There are no toilets, no drainage, no sewers. You relieve yourself in pits, buckets, or just the open ground. At night, urine jars spill. By morning, it's mud again. The whole village reeks: sour sweat, animal musk, mold, rotting food. The smell never leaves your nose. It soaks into your hair, your clothes, your skin. You carry it like a second soul. The rise of parasites living close to animals has its perks: milk, meat, manure. But mostly it means parasites. Cows share their worms, pigs their flukes, chickens their mites. Lice hop from scalp to scalp, fleas feast on ankles, ticks cling to armpits. Your intestines are a zoo, roundworms, tapeworms, hookworms, all making themselves at home. Your belly swells with bloat, but you're malnourished, every scrap of food stolen by something wriggling inside you. And let's not forget, rats, the granaries you built. Perfect rat palaces. They burrow through mud walls, nibble your grain, leave droppings everywhere. The fleas they carry bite you, then scurry back to the rats. Congratulations, you've just created the perfect disease highway. Germs on the march. Hunter-gatherers had disease, sure, but small outbreaks that burned out quickly. Sedentary life changes the rules. Suddenly, you're packed into villages of 100 people or more. Close quarters, bad sanitation, animals everywhere. Germs don't just survive here, they thrive. Respiratory infections spread like wildfire. One sneeze in a smoky hut, and the whole family's coughing. Cuts from farm tools fester into deadly infections. Diarrhea becomes constant, a cycle of dehydration that kills more children than wolves ever could. Every day is a roll of the microbial dice. And the worst part, farming introduces crowd diseases that need large, dense populations to survive. Things like measles, smallpox, and influenza are still in their infancy here, mutating quietly in animal hosts before leaping into humans. You're the bridge between pig coughs and pandemics. You don't just live with animals, you incubate their plagues. Childhood roulette, let's be blunt, half the kids in your village won't live past 5. Fevers, diarrhea, lung infections, all unstoppable without medicine. The survivors carry scars, stunted growth, constant coughs. You grow up surrounded by tiny graves. Death isn't a rare tragedy. It's Tuesday. Parents don't even name children until they're sure they'll survive a few winters. Some never do. If you're unlucky, you're chosen as a sacrifice to cure the sickness. Priests insist the gods want blood, and you can't exactly argue. One child buried under the floor beams of a hut, another tossed into a pit, another strangled during a fever outbreak. If the sickness continues, more offerings are made. That's how powerless you are. Death claims you either way. The illusion of remedies. And what about medicine? Surely your village has healers. They do, but their treatments are worse than the illness. A cough? They smear ash on your chest. Fever? You're purged with rancid herbs that make you vomit more. A festering wound? They rub it with mud and animal fat. Sometimes they try trepanning, drilling a hole in your skull to let the sickness out. Half the time you die. The other half, you're left with a migraine and a hole in your head. No one knows about germs. No one knows about sanitation. They think disease comes from angry gods, bad air, or curses from rival villages, which means the real cure, cleaning, boiling water, washing hands, never happens. You suffer and die because no one can imagine otherwise. Death everywhere. The result? Your entire life is haunted by sickness. Villages shrink from epidemics, survivors burying neighbors in shallow graves, bodies rot in fields, spreading more disease. Every cough is suspicious. Every fever is a death sentence. You don't grow old. Your body breaks under parasites, infections, and malnutrition. Bones show stunted growth, worn joints, abscessed teeth. If you live to 30, you're ancient, and if you're lucky enough to survive childbirth, famine and raids, disease will finish you off anyway. Farming, the plague factory. This is the bitter truth. Farming didn't just invent inequality and war, it invented epidemics. By tying humans, animals, and waste together, it created the perfect storm for germs to evolve and spread. Your ancestors traded mobility for misery, hunting for harvesting, freedom for filth. And you're the guinea pig of this grand experiment. You won't survive it. Your children won't survive it, but the diseases will. They'll spread, mutate, return stronger. From your village filth, humanity's great plagues are born. Measles, smallpox, influenza, tuberculosis, they're coming. And when they do, they'll carry your name, your suffering, your bones in mass graves. Because in the first farming villages, survival isn't just hard, it's impossible. You're not building civilization, you're building the world's first biohazard zone, and it will kill you. You've scraped through hunger, survived rats, endured parasites, and dodged raids. But there's still one thing controlling your life that you can't fight with a hoe or a spear. The gods, or at least the idea of them. Because the first farming villages didn't just invent bread, they invented religion. And if you think your modern Sunday service feels strict, wait until you see what your Neolithic neighbors demand. Spoiler: it's blood, grain, and obedience. Fear makes gods. Imagine waking up in your mud brick hut. The harvest has failed again. Your neighbors are coughing themselves into shallow graves. The goats are sick, the stream reeks, the sky won't rain. None of this makes sense. Science hasn't been invented yet. You don't know about microbes, climate cycles, or parasites. All you know is that things keep going wrong, and somebody, somewhere, must be responsible. Enter the gods. Every tree, river, storm cloud, and heap of grain sprouts a spirit in your mind. You don't just see rain, you see a rain god. You don't just see the sun, you see a furious sun god who's clearly punishing you for forgetting yesterday's offering. Farming doesn't just make food, it makes uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds superstition, rituals of survival. So how do you fix it? Ritual. Endless, exhausting ritual. You slaughter animals and pour their blood onto the soil, hoping it makes wheat sprout. You bury figurines of fertility goddesses beneath doorways, whispering prayers for milk and healthy babies. You burn the best part of your grain as an offering, even though your children are already hungry. Sacrifice is the tax of farming life. And sometimes, animals aren't enough. Archaeology leaves little doubt. Human bones turn up buried under houses, their skulls cracked deliberately, their bodies arranged ritualistically. Infants especially, perhaps to bless a new building or appease a deity. You want rain, you want the goats to stop dying, better give the gods something valuable. And in a world where survival is a lottery, there's nothing more valuable than a human life. Priests appear out of this bloody mess, emerge the first specialists. Priests, they don't farm, they don't haul water, they stand at the edge of the fields muttering incantations. And somehow, they're the ones in charge. Why? Because they claim to speak for the gods. And when you're desperate, you'll believe anyone who says they can stop the storms. So, when the priest tells you to hand over a share of your grain, you do it. When he says your cousin's illness is the punishment of the gods, you nod. When he orders a child sacrificed to restore balance, you lower your eyes and hope it's not yours. Religion, like the first fences, doesn't just protect, it controls. The weight of ritual life becomes a cycle of ritual and fear. Planting season, sacrifice a goat. Drought, burn a hut. Flood, kill a prisoner. Too much rain, too little. Either way, the gods are furious, and you're paying the bill. Your calendar isn't months and days, it's rituals, days of fasting, days of offerings, days of burying precious food in pits to rot, because the gods need it more than you do. Every task becomes spiritual. Grinding grain is a prayer. Lighting the hearth is a ritual. Even sneezing is seen as a sign from some minor household god. You live in a suffocating world where every mistake is cosmic. Forget a prayer, skip a ritual, offend the wrong spirit, and you're not just unlucky, you've doomed the village. Superstition as law, and here's the kicker. Superstition becomes law. Forget about fairness or reason. If you trip and spill water, it's an omen. If the barley rots, it's because you dreamed of the wrong animal. If your neighbor wants your land, he might accuse you of cursing the fields, and suddenly you're the sacrifice. Farming villages are fertile soil for witch hunts. Every failure, every plague, every death needs a culprit. The gods demand blame, and society delivers it, usually onto the weakest. The gods grow teeth. The gods don't stay vague spirits for long. They grow sharper, meaner, more human. You carve their faces into stone. You build shrines where priests mutter in smoky darkness. Fertility goddesses with swollen hips, bull gods with flaring nostrils, sun gods glaring from hilltops, each one hungrier than the last, and the hungriest of all is fear. Fear keeps you obedient. Fear convinces you to hand over grain you can't spare. Fear tells you not to question when your cousin disappears after the priest whispers about a dream. Fear stitches religion into every breath. The price of faith. What does this mean for you? It means you live not just under famine, disease, and raids, but under cosmic terror. You never know when the gods will strike. You never know when the priest will decide you're the offering, and you never escape the rituals. Your life is one long negotiation with unseen powers who never answer except in disaster. You're not free. You're not safe. You're trapped in a spiritual bureaucracy where your only role is to pay, obey, and pray. And still the floods come. The crops fail. The children die. Which proves the point, no matter how much you sacrifice, it's never enough. Farming's oldest invention, so, what's the oldest invention of farming villages? Not bread, not pottery, not plows, it's religion. Born of fear, sharpened into ritual, twisted into power. And you don't survive it. Because whether you're the sacrifice, the starving believer, or just another parasite-ridden worshipper, the gods always get their due. You've endured famine, raids, parasites, and gods that never answer. But now comes the final chapter, death. Because in the first farming villages, everything led here eventually. Hunger wore you down, disease hollowed you out, superstition ruled you, and violence cleaned up what was left. If you think the story ends with survival, you haven't been paying attention. The truth is simple. Farming didn't just build civilization, it built the conditions for collapse. And you, poor villager, are about to be crushed under the weight of your own invention. The wear of years. By the time you're 30, your body looks 60. Years of hauling water, digging soil, bending at the waist, and sleeping in damp huts leave you permanently hunched. Arthritis gnaws at your joints. Your teeth are rotten stumps, each bite sparking pain. Worms still live in your gut, chewing away the little nutrition left. And every winter, the cough deepens, rattling your chest like stones in a jar. You're not old. You're just done. Your bones tell the story better than you can. Archaeologists find skeletons with worn-down teeth, broken spines, and signs of malnutrition in nearly every grave. The first farmers weren't healthier than foragers. They were sicker, shorter, weaker. They built villages, but they traded their bodies to do it. The grave beside the hearth. When you die, it won't be in a clean bed or a sacred temple. It'll be on a straw mat in the corner of your hut, surrounded by smoke, fleas, and the smell of sour beer. Your family will dig a shallow grave, sometimes right beneath the floor, covering your body with clay and stones. Maybe they'll place a bowl or a bead with you, a token for the afterlife. But most likely, they'll move quickly, because sickness spreads and death is contagious. You don't get remembered. No carved tombstone. No heroic saga. Just a body under dirt, pressed down by the weight of the living above you. The hut continues. Meals are cooked. Babies cry. Goats bleat, and your bones rest beneath it all, forgotten. Collapse on the horizon. And it's not just individuals who die. Whole villages collapse. The soil wears out from over-farming. Rivers flood unpredictably. Drought turns fields to dust. When food disappears, families abandon their homes, leaving behind broken pots and empty storage pits. Sometimes raiders finish the job, burning huts and scattering survivors. Other times, disease rips through, leaving only silence and rats. Archaeology shows it again and again. Early villages rise, grow, then vanish. No epic battles, no grand finales, just quiet collapse. Farming promised stability, but it delivered fragility. One bad harvest and everything falls apart. Death as a constant companion. Death is never far in these villages. It hovers in smoke-filled huts, lurks in grain stores, rides on the backs of fleas. Infant graves fill the ground. Women die in childbirth. Men collapse in fields. There are no old age homes, no retirements, no golden years, just work, sickness and shallow graves. Children learn death before they learn language. They see siblings buried. They help carry baskets of earth for graves. They know the smell of decay. To be born in a farming village is to grow up under the shadow of constant endings. The illusion of progress. But here's the cruel irony. People believed farming was progress. More food, more people, more security. And in a way, they weren't wrong. Farming allowed villages to grow, populations to rise, and eventually cities to form. But for the actual farmers, the men and women bent in fields, coughing in huts, bleeding from ritual cuts, life wasn't better, it was harder. Hunter-gatherers worked less, ate more variety, and lived freer. Farmers worked more, ate less, and lived shorter. Civilization was born, yes, but out of the misery of those who lived and died in mud brick huts. You wouldn't survive so. Could you survive a day in the first farming villages? The answer is no. You'd break under the work. You'd choke on the smoke. You'd vomit from the water. You'd scratch until your skin bled from fleas. You'd starve in winter, cough through spring, scratch through summer, and pray through autumn. And eventually you'd die, young, weak, and forgotten. But you wouldn't just die, you'd build the foundations of the world we live in. Because every sacrifice, every grave, every broken body in those first villages laid the bricks of history. You are the ancestor, the experiment, the seed of civilization. You don't survive, but your suffering does. Reflection. So tonight, as you lie in a clean bed, under washed sheets, drinking safe water, think of them. The nameless millions who traded freedom for farming, who endured filth and famine so you wouldn't have to. They didn't live in golden ages, they lived in mud, fear, and exhaustion. And yet, they kept going. That's the true legacy of the first farming villages. Not their grain, not their gods, not their huts, but the sheer stubbornness of human beings, to plant seeds in cursed soil, to bury children and still bear more, to face hunger, disease, and death, and still choose to live another day. You wouldn't survive a day in their world, but without them, you wouldn't have yours.